I've filmed over 600 videos on this channel, and it's pretty obvious that you're not going to have time to watch each and every one of them. So today I've done something a little bit different. I have compiled some of the best bits from the videos that I have filmed around moving to Italy to create a bit of a mini masterclass on how to prepare yourself for your forthcoming move to Italy. Now, of course, I can't do a video with a one-size-fits-all approach. Everyone is going to have a slightly different set of circumstances that lead them to move into Italy. It's impossible that one video can solve all of your problems, but I do think that this will give you a very, very good grounding. And if you're interested to watch any of the videos that I feature in this masterclass in more detail, I have put the links below in the show notes to each of the videos so that you can watch the rest of the content if that particular clip resonates with you. So without further ado, let's get into this Moving to Italy masterclass. So you have a dream to move to Italy. Maybe you want to retire here, maybe you want to work here, or maybe you want to study here. One thing is certain though, you will more than likely end up talking about this dream to another person, whether that be a friend, family member, or even a stranger on the internet. And if you're not careful, this often marks the beginning of the end. As humans, we are all wired to want to seek validation from other people. We want people to pat us on the back and tell us we're doing the right thing, except that doesn't always happen. But why? People don't get your dreams and vision. It's not possible, however much we wish it were, for another person to physically step into our shoes, to live our life, to dive deep into the depths of our mind, to experience our situation. So if that's the case, then we cannot expect other people to really fully understand the rationale and reasoning behind our decisions. Our dreams are ours alone for a very good reason. And so we cannot expect other people to be our cheerleaders for something that they cannot fully understand themselves. People are only interested in themselves. The classic book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, talks about this very concept, in that as human beings, we are intrinsically wired to only be interested in our own pursuits, gains, and benefits. So if you consider, if you're talking to another person who isn't going to be directly involved or impacted by your decision to move to Italy, chances are their interest in your dream is going to wane very quickly. Disinterest leads to indifference, which is a world away from what validation really is. So it's really important to remember this if you're talking about this with somebody who isn't really going to be directly impacted by your choice. So what is the solution? Don't breathe word to anyone? Not entirely. Here are some things that I would do if I were you and I wanted to move to Italy. I wouldn't be so vocal in online expat groups. Online expat groups can be feral and wild. You can find some goodness in them, but in the majority of cases, they are full of negative Nancy's and people who want to tear up your dreams. Moderators do their best, but unfortunately, and ironically even, these are not the communities in which you can share your Italian dream, unless you are prepared for the trolls. Use expat groups sparingly to find out more information about a different part of Italy, or indeed to learn more about the culture, but take everything you are told with a pinch of salt. These are not the places to ask about work, prospects, or even to share a business idea. Unfortunately, these aspects are areas in which I've seen people be absolutely torn to shreds in these groups whenever they pose a question to do with one of these aspects. So don't say I didn't warn you. You need to be shrewd as well, because not every recommendation given in these expat groups is completely unbiased. A lot of these expat groups are run like businesses, with referral links in place as well, where members can earn money based on what they share and talk about. So really and truly be very careful. Always do your due diligence. Don't accept anything at face value in these groups. I would use YouTube to gain a real life perspective of life in Italy. There's something comforting about watching a video of a particular part of Italy that you're interested in with a real person showing you around and telling you about the reality of life there, more so than a faceless comment on the internet in an expat group, for example. There are many different content creators living in all different parts of Italy. If you're interested in life in South Italy, then of course you're in the right place. Hit the subscribe button so you can follow along with all of my content. But that aside, YouTube is a great resource to really discover the heart and soul of what Italy is about. In the first place, you kind of need to start is, why do you want to come to Italy? Really important question, because it's going to help you to get a bit clearer on the things you're going to do when you're here, and most importantly, where in Italy you're going to base yourself. Now, for those of you that plan to move to Italy, this question is even more significant, because moving to Italy is just the beginning. When you actually arrive here, that is when you really begin the whole process of adjustment, getting used to life here, dealing with cultural differences, language. There are a whole heap of things that you go through when you first move to Italy. And if you do not know why on earth you are in Italy to begin with, this is going to be a really challenging and difficult time for you. And it may mean that you even question your decision altogether. So I really believe that you need to spend a lot of time sitting down, reflecting and thinking about this question, because it's really going to impact the quality of life that you are going to have here in Italy. It's going to really mean that you get really clear and build a strong foundation as to why Italy is your chosen country that will weather you during the storms that you will inevitably encounter at some point in your life here. So really do spend some time sitting with this. Dive deep, journal, brainstorm, whatever you need to do to get outside of you onto paper and into like the visual form, the real reason why you want to make Italy your home. Then once you've got that, you kind of want to say to yourself, what are my non-negotiables when it comes to Italy? Non-negotiables, I love this, because really and truly we all have things that we want to maintain, whether we are moving here or we're visiting Italy. There are certain things that are important to us and we want to make sure that we can still retain those even though we're in another country. Now, when it comes to moving to Italy, your non-negotiables are super important. You need to know exactly why you want to move to Italy first and foremost, and then you need to know exactly what is important for you in your life here. Do you want to be close to a city centre? Do you want to be within walking distance of the main shops and services? Do you need to be near anything in particular, like a school, for example? Do you want to be in the countryside, or would you prefer to be in a busier environment? What kind of home do you want to live in? Do you want to live in an apartment, in a residence, or would you prefer to have an independent home such as a villa? So many questions, so many things you need to think about when it comes to your non-negotiables, because when you get really crystal clear on this and you draw up a list of your non-negotiables, this is going to help you to pinpoint exactly where in Italy is going to be best for you and exactly the type of accommodation you should be looking for. And it's just going to make this whole process so much easier. It's the process of elimination when you decide that you want to move to Italy. You've got to filter out the places that aren't quite the right fit for you until you find the one place that's just right. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think there is one place in Italy that is 100% perfect. However, you will find a place that meets your needs and your non-negotiables. But until you've figured those out, it's going to be very difficult for you to begin to understand where that could be. So spend quite a bit of time with this, because it really and truly is a very, very important aspect when you're thinking about moving to Italy. Rewiring your brain. And there are three parts to this really. You want to be focusing on patience first and foremost, followed by being flexible, and then thirdly, by being present. So let's talk about focusing on patience. You are going to want to start practicing patience in every aspect of your life, in whatever country you may be living in at the moment. If you're already here in Italy, you want to start practicing patience, because your patience will be tested at different times living here in Italy. It might be tested by the bureaucracy, which I know I'm not the only one to say can be an absolute nightmare at times. It might be tested by the timeframes that people give you here for projects and work that needs to be done. You know, people here in Italy, especially in the south, can be very flexible with their timeframes. 1 week ends up turning into 3 weeks. So you've got to have a degree of patience. You also need to have a degree of patience when it comes to understanding about life here, understanding the intricacies of life, understanding your roles and responsibilities as a resident, for example. These all require different levels of patience. So the sooner that you can start practicing patience in your life at whatever stage of your journey you're at, the better it's going to be for you, and the easier you are going to start adapting to life here in Italy. If you arrive here impatient, it's going to make your experience very, very difficult, because unfortunately your impatience is not going to make people suddenly hurry up here. So you really, really do need to start practicing this skill as soon as you can. Which leads nicely into being flexible. Now, you need to be flexible because life here in Italy isn't rigid, and I sometimes consider myself to be quite rigid. You know, I have certain boundaries, I have certain belief systems, I like things to be done a certain way, basically. I'm a double Virgo, which really doesn't help either. But that aside, life here in Italy, especially in the south, can be a bit more go with the flow. And if you're quite a rigid person, that can be difficult to adjust to. So you need to practice being flexible. Practice being in the moment a bit more, which ties into the third point about being present, but also practice like getting used to spontaneity, getting used to plans being finalized at the last minute rather than 3 months in advance, getting used to like the way of life, like one evening suddenly feeling like doing something different out of the ordinary to what you normally do, or visiting a different part of Italy, or going to a different restaurant, pushing the boat out in different ways. But you want to try and practice being as flexible as you can before you move here. It will help you to go with the ebbs and flows of life here in Italy, and to go with the flow, because it is difficult to live here sometimes if you're very fixed in your opinions, viewpoints, or way of life. Having that degree of flexibility just helps you to weather the storms a little bit when you encounter them, but also to embrace and enjoy life here, because essentially it is that flowing freedom that can help you to really experience the heart and soul of this country. Which leads into the third point, which is about being present. So much of life here is spent in the moment. People will talk about the future, but I don't come across many people who will tell me what their 5-year goals are. People just don't have that kind of mindset here in South Italy. People have an idea of what they want to do, but often they play it by ear, and they really approach life in small chunks of time rather than in big leaps. Now, whether or not you agree with that is a very personal thing. I do like to have future objectives, because I think otherwise my fear is that my life will continue to look the same 6 or 7 years from now. But I do also appreciate how being in the moment relaxes you and calms you down. And honestly, if I'm in a state of anxiety, which at points I can be, it is those moments of being present that really help to ground me. So there is a lot of beauty in this philosophy, but if it doesn't come naturally to you and it's not something that you're used to doing, you need to start practicing this as soon as you can. Practice just being present in your space wherever you're at. Go out in nature, sit, just observe, watch, don't think about anything, don't go on your phone, just take in what is around you, take in your surroundings. This principle will definitely help you to approach life in a much more calm way, and also help you to appreciate things here more as well, because you are really observing and acknowledging what is going on around you. And this is a really, really important thing. There is a lot of information that you can find on the internet to do with the process of moving to Italy, the bureaucracy, the steps that you need to take to make your dream an absolute reality. However, not many people will tell you about what I consider to be the most fundamental aspect of all concerning your forthcoming move to Italy, and that is your mindset. Your mindset is the one thing that is going to make the biggest difference to the experience that you have once you actually start living here in Italy. And you have to be realistic about your life here in Italy. You will always be with you. This is a really famous expression that people quote, and it is the truest thing that I've ever heard. You can travel to 1,000,001 different countries, but you are never going to escape you. And so you need to be realistic about your experiences here in Italy. If you think moving to Italy is going to solve all of your problems, is going to make your life that little bit easier, you need to understand it probably isn't. If anything, it's going to highlight and accentuate those existing problems because you are in a brand new environment and setting and there is no sense of familiarity. So just be aware of this. Italy is not a problem solver or fixer. At the beginning, it can make you feel like you're in this daydream because of course, everyone goes through the honeymoon phase. But as you start to settle a bit more into life here, and you develop a routine and things maybe sometimes become a little bit mundane, those existing problems start to surface and sometimes they feel even more intense than they may have felt back in your previous country. So just remember this. Be realistic about the life that you expect to lead here in Italy. Be aware of the negative aspects of life here, the pitfalls, the things that might drive you crazy like bureaucracy or disorganization, for example. But you have to be prepared for this. Don't just believe the fairy tale images of life here in Italy. I've said it to you in practically every video that I've ever recorded on this channel. Italy is not a romantic daydream. Italy is real life. It is problematic, it is beautiful, it is complicated, it is troubled, it is life-changing, it is the most complex country you could probably ever choose to live in, but I promise you it's going to teach you some of the best lessons you could ever ask to learn. And so this is it really, you have to balance this. You have to come here and have a realistic expectation of your life here. And so I think if you can do that, that definitely helps with your mindset because a lot of people don't. A lot of people choose to believe the fairy tale of life here, and then that is why I think a lot of people become bitter later on because life here doesn't meet their initial expectations. So do your research and look at it from a realistic point of view, not from the point of view of a tourist who is just coming here for a 2-week holiday, because those kinds of expectations and experiences are going to be very different compared to those that you will have when you live here for an extended period of time. There's no running away from it. You need to learn Italian, and the sooner you can start learning, the better. Even begin today if you can. There are so many resources that you can use to do this, from free resources such as watching YouTube videos or people on Instagram or TikTok, through to more paid programs. But I really recommend that you just start to form a consistent study habit. It doesn't have to be trying to find huge chunks of time every single week. It can just be as much as like 15 to 30 minutes a day. If that's all you can handle, over the course of a week, you've achieved more than you would have if you were trying to find solid 1 or 2 hour chunks. So the power of consistency is very important when it comes to learning a language. But as I've said in so many of my other videos, I don't want you to think that you have to be fluent before you move here. Some people really give this advice to people that want to move here and say you need to speak Italian fluently before you come here. I don't agree with this because I think to reach a degree of fluency can take some people years. And you know, why hold off your dream for years just to arrive at this perceived perfect place before moving here? I say move here with an adequate amount of Italian to be able to communicate in everyday situations, but then continue your study when you're here, because at least then you're starting to live your dream, right? It's not easy to survive life here if you don't speak in Italian. You will be lucky, you will find people who can interpret for you. Expat groups can help a lot as well if you kind of need that solidarity from people who speak your language, but you really do need to start learning, and I really do think begin as soon as you can and don't stop learning as soon as you arrive here. I think this is something that a lot of people, they know that they have to do this, but they don't really understand how it's going to impact their life until they start living this experience. So make sure that you concentrate on this if you are planning to move to Italy, and don't let the language scare you from making this decision. It's not easy to learn another language, particularly when you're an adult and you have adult responsibilities and you're kind of out of touch with studying, because let's face it, once we leave school, college, university, wherever we've gone, we kind of lose the habit of studying unless it's a discipline that we maintain. So Don't let it overwhelm you. Find a study routine and path that fits you, and make sure that you do what lights you up and do what makes you feel good when it comes to study. If you're not the person to sit at a table with a textbook, don't do it. Watch a video instead. Play an interactive game instead. There are lots of other things that you can do to kind of encourage you to learn the language rather than trying to follow traditional methods. A lot of newspaper articles, magazine articles will talk about this €1 home initiative in very romantic terms. It's almost like it is sold as the surefire way to move to Italy and make your dream a reality for less than the price of a takeaway coffee. However, there is so much that goes into this that I really want to make sure that you are aware of. Now, first and foremost, the condition of the homes. They are not habitable. You buy them. For €1, you are buying a crumbling shell in most cases. These homes have often been vacant for many years, and as such, they are crumbling away, and they've had little to no investment in that time. So they need a lot of work done to them, which means that you are going to have to invest quite a bit of money. And you can see for yourself on YouTube plenty of videos of people who have done up these €1 homes, and they have invested anywhere from tens of thousands of euros up to hundreds of thousands of euros, depending on the work that needed to be done. So it's not a cheap investment. Now, I will say that if you're coming from a country where property prices are ridiculously high, I'm thinking America, I'm thinking the United Kingdom, then yes, even with the extra costs that you have to pay in terms of building work, in terms of the work itself that needs to be done, and also in terms of like taxes and paperwork that you have to complete, you could probably find somewhere here a lot cheaper than you would in your own country. However, you've then got to think about the location, because let's address the elephant in the room. There is a reason why the local people left these areas. It's because they desired more shops and services, better career prospects, maybe better schools. These places are often remote locations. You can find these €1 home initiatives dotted all across Italy, including here in Sicily, but they are really often in remote places with very little to do in and around the area itself. So you've got to decide if that is going to suit your lifestyle and the kind of life that you want to lead here in Italy. Because if you don't plan to drive here in Italy, then you're probably not going to be interested in these €1 homes, because the public transport is going to be limited at best. You've really got to factor this in, because living in the countryside, living in remote places isn't for everyone, and it can be really isolating, especially at the beginning when you don't really know many people, if anyone at all. So it's really important that you remember this. Secondly, you've got to consider what your budget is, because you see some comune will instill terms and conditions when it comes to selling these homes, in that you have to invest a certain amount of money, and you also in some cases have to complete the work by a certain amount of time. It's usually around 3 years, but that can vary depending on the comune. And then also tied into that is that you may have to spend a certain amount of time living permanently, full-time in the property. The reason why is because some people have thought that this could be a great way to buy a second home or to list a home under Airbnb once it's refurbished. But of course, that goes against what this whole initiative is designed to do. This initiative is designed to breathe life back into these communities, not to keep them on a very transitory basis with people coming and going with no real permanence. So some commune will stipulate that you have to be resident full-time in that property for a certain amount of years. So you must do your research. And this is why I say this isn't an option for everyone. Not to mention the amount of time it's going to take to do these properties up. It isn't going to be a quick process. Work here in Italy takes forever. And trying to find reputable builders and, getting all of that signed off, all the bureaucracy that goes into building work here in Italy can take a long time. So this is not an immediate solution. It's not something that you're going to have done and dusted in a couple of months. It could take you a year or longer to have your home fully ready to be able to move into. It really depends on what work you have to get done. I have been renting homes here now for 6 years, and I can tell you it is so different compared to how I used to rent property back in the UK. What are some things that no one tells you about when it comes to renting in Italy? Let's begin with the first, most important one of all, the condition of the home. Now, this is something that really took me by surprise when I moved to Italy, because coming from the UK, when you rent a property in the UK, you rent it in good condition, like you are ready to move in. There is a fitted kitchen suite, there is a fitted bathroom suite, you know, there are light fixtures, everything is ready to go. You don't have to do very much, if at all, to prepare yourself for moving in. You've just got to unpack your stuff. That has always been my experience in the UK, and I know that I'm not alone. Here in Italy though, goodness me, you'll be very lucky if you have a similar experience, because the majority of homes that you rent here in Italy are empty shells. And this is the thing that really took me by surprise. Now, the first home that I rented in Salerno, I'll put a picture here, was actually furnished. We were really lucky. We got this modern, beautiful apartment that came fitted with furniture, but that was very rare. Again, it was through somebody we knew, always connections, it builds the trust. I'll talk more about that later. But essentially, that was a really rare find. It's super unusual to find properties that are furnished. Now, take the home that I'm currently in here in Palermo, and this was an empty shell. We were super lucky because the owners of this home decided to repaint the entire home before we moved in, because it was really dated and old. But again, we kind of knew the people who rented this property to us through the different connections we have. And so, you know, again, we were really lucky about that, because I honestly think if we'd been somebody from outside of this circle, we may not have had the same experience, you know? So, yeah, this is it, empty shells. You are very lucky if you find a kitchen suite, and when I mean kitchen suite, I mean the full shebang. Cupboards, sink, oven, the works. You are really lucky if you find that fitted in your home. When we moved in, we did not have a kitchen here. We had to buy a kitchen and have it fitted. And this is exactly how it works here in Italy. People actually move homes with their kitchen suites. It's considered to be like a piece of furniture. It's quite incredible. So that's the first thing you've got to consider, because it's quite an expense you've got to start laying out money for from the very beginning, when you think you've got to actually fit a kitchen in your home to be able to rent it. The second thing you've got to think about as well is just the general condition of the home itself. Now, as I said to you, we were really lucky in this home in Palermo in the sense that they repainted the walls. That isn't necessarily the case. Normally what you find when you move in is what you have to deal with. So that normally means that if you want to repaint things and you're able to, that responsibility falls on your shoulders, even though it isn't your home. Now, tied into that is the cleanliness of the home that you're going to move into. In the UK, it's very normal to have a pre-tenancy clean done on the property that you move into, so that it's spick and span on the day of moving. But in Italy, it isn't the case. It took us an entire week to clean this home before it was ready for us to move our belongings into. And trust me, that is something that, gosh, well, I wasn't ready for, because I was ready to have a home that was at least clean enough for me to move my stuff into. So you've got to be prepared for this. The condition of the homes are not always fantastic. And, you know, you've got to get clear on your expectations and understand that homes here are shells, and essentially you're not necessarily going to have all your creature comforts fitted when you actually sign the lease to rent your property. I want to show you both how you can look for properties and also the things that you need to be aware of to help to make your house hunting process that little bit smoother. Now, to begin your search, I recommend utilising the internet. Idealista and Immobiliare are two fantastic internet sites that give you the possibility to search for homes, apartments, and with Idealista, individual rooms, depending on your requirements. Now, personally, I prefer Idealista, so this is the website that we are going to use for this video. Now, we are going to search for a home or apartment in Salerno, because I feel like I know that city well, having lived there for 4 years. Now, as you can see, Salerno is divided into areas. We are going to look specifically in the centre, so you can get an idea of prices and how they can vary depending on your location. Now, as you can see, homes in Italy are listed according to their room number. So it's rare to see an apartment listed as 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom. It's usually listed according to its room number. Now, there are a couple of things to pay attention to when you're looking for properties in Italy. So the first is obviously room number. The second is the size of the apartment. All apartments are measured in metres squared. As we can see from this example, this is an 80 metre squared apartment, 2 rooms, €800 per month. Now, judging from the initial pictures that I can see up here, I am imagining that this is going to be a fully furnished apartment, which is rare in Italy. These types of apartments usually get snapped up very quickly, or they are usually only available for rent for a short period of time. So, very important for you to know this. If you scroll down, you can see the description, which you can also translate into English if your Italian isn't fantastic. And yes, as you can see, this is an apartment available on a transitory lease, which basically means it is not a long-term let. You will only be able to live in this property for a maximum of 18 months. So yes, it's likely this home has another use for it at other times of the year, which would explain why you can't rent it long-term. So, let's look at another property. Now, this property is significantly smaller. This is only 46 metres squared, 2 rooms at €670 per month. Now, this is an example of a property that is a transitory lease, which does not allow the use of residency against it. So this is what you have to be careful of with transitory leases. Often these types of properties are usually bed and breakfast homes or Airbnbs, which are let out for short-term periods only, so you cannot claim residency against them. So pay attention to that, because if your visa requirements depend on this, this could prove to be a problem for you later on if you are not careful. Now, when it comes to the first thing that I have noticed, it is that location really does impact availability. Now, if you plan to move to a place in South Italy that is popular with tourists, you have to get ready to expect that that is going to impact quite a few things, including just how many properties you are going to find available on a long-term basis. Let me show you an example. So if we look for the province of Salerno, because the province covers quite a large area, we can see that there are 435 available properties to rent. However, if we filter that search down to long-term residential properties, we can see it actually leaves us with 337 homes to rent. So that's like, nearly a 100 home difference in terms of availability. So you can see a lot of homes in South Italy are let out now on transitory leases, which are usually up to a period of 18 months. Now, you have to be careful, because sometimes you will find a website that doesn't actually specify that the home is for a transitory lease until you read right down at the bottom in the small print. For example, Immobiliare doesn't actually have a search filter like Idealista does to identify the type of contract that you want for your property. So a little clue for you to help you identify the properties that are more than likely going to be transitory leases. Well, there are 2 clues actually. The first is the size of the property in proportion to the amount of money they want per month. There are some shocking examples that you can see here of the amount of money that people are asking for in terms of the size of the property you're going to get. This is a red flag and a clear indicator that this is a transitory property, because as much as property prices have increased, which we'll talk about next, it's not to this kind of extreme here in South Italy. Another kind of thing to be aware of relates to the photographs themselves. If you see photographs of the beds with towels that are positioned really neatly at the bottom of the bed, let me tell you, that is a transitory lease. I don't know about you, but I don't roll up my towels on the bottom of my bed at home. So if you see that, you understand that that property is not going to be let on a long-term basis. So they are 2 clues that you can kind of bear in mind when you're searching through properties if it isn't immediately obvious that a property is transitory or long-term. Okay, so let's move into visas then. So this is the main topic of this interview. tell me about visas. What do you know? What are the different types of visas? It's like a complete minefield, I think. It's very difficult to navigate. So tell me what you know.
Well, I mean, like, it's so funny that you said you were getting a lot more comments, because actually I originally like designed my business, like content, everything, thinking that it was for Americans. And then I realized like with Brexit, actually, like a large portion of the people that reach out are coming from the UK and are trying to figure out. And their questions are always like, okay, wait, can I sneak in with the Brexit? Like, can I still sneak in? Which, like, it's funny because we have found a few people who were able to like say, oh, but I was in Italy before. So, you know, it's like there's still some little leeway there, but not a lot. Like most of the time it's mostly closed. But yeah, I mean, like the visas, well, it's funny because like the visa is not even the start of the whole like process of coming to Italy, because that is what you need to get in. But then, like, you know, after you get your visa, so your visa helps you enter the country. After you get that, you have to do the permesso di soggiorno every year or every 2 years, like depending on what you do. And that is the longest process, and it's never ending. So, you know, you get your visa and you're super excited. You're like, okay, cool, I can like move to Italy now. And you don't realize like, oh no, there's more to do. Like there's
the beginning.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also really funny because, so I came on a study visa. Obviously, I came for university, which is basically one of the easiest, we can say, visas to do, because you just need to be enrolled you just need to have a program. And a lot of people I know did come over with that visa. It's just sort of like the starting point. But obviously then we have ones for work, for freelance, for marriage. Actually, there's not a visa for marriage. Usually you just come over and figure it out here. And then like retirement, like that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different ones, but it is amazing to me how many people don't realize they need one. Like, like there are a lot of people in Facebook groups who are like, hey, so I came to Italy like 6 months ago and I want to do this. And I was like, okay, where's your visa? Like, they don't. So
there are lots of misconceptions about visas as well. Like even where, I mean, you can tell me, can you buy a visa?
No, you have to pay for what? Yes, technically. Technically, there's one, but it cost $500,000. So they have introduced this thing called an investor visa, and you can basically give the government money, or you can donate money to like, it has to be a foundation that the government approves of, but like you can do some like philanthropic like donation, and they'll give you a visa to come live in Italy for 2 years. But every time you want to renew that, you have to pay again. Like how paid. And I want to say, actually, the starting price might be lower. It might be like $250,000. Might be like the bare minimum. Yeah, I mean, less. But yeah, so like I remember it was like there's a few different tiers that you can go. But no, like other than that, no, you have to like apply, and they definitely can reject you. And they can easily reject you for things that aren't even on the checklist. Like they might just decide that day they don't like you and reject you. So, I mean, there's that. And then another misconception that I hear a lot are like with the 1 year house things and with all the like housing, because housing in general is cheap in Italy. A lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to buy a house in Italy and then I can just go live there. You can't. Like owning a house or owning property in Italy doesn't give you actually any guarantee that you'll get a visa. To restore it right now, Italy has a bunch of bonuses. But if you don't have a visa and you're not a resident and you don't actually have anything in Italy, you can't necessarily get those bonuses. And then people don't necessarily want to work with you if you don't have a bank account in Italy, but you can't get a bank account in Italy without being like, everything just stacks on top of each other. So it actually like doesn't, like there are people who have done it, but most people who I know have done it successfully already were dual citizens, or they got in through Brexit, like before Brexit happened completely. So, yeah. Like, I don't know many people have been able to like get a visa because they bought a €1 house.
Yes, I think this is definitely a common misconception. And also when it comes to work as well, because a lot of people have been messaging me, particularly because they want to find work in Italy. Now, obviously, when I moved here pre-Brexit, it was just a case of emailing schools or, you know, wherever I wanted to work and sending my CV, and that was it. But now, am I right in thinking that a school or a company has to sponsor you if you decide to obtain a visa in that way?
Yes. So they have to sponsor you. And the great thing is actually Brexit's really nice for us Americans because, and it's really great if you're Irish, by the way, because basically to sponsor a visa, you have to prove that no one else in Italy and no one else in the EU can do your job. And that's like, they have to prove that in order to give you the sponsorship for a visa. And in reality, like English schools don't give out visas because the truth is like there are plenty of people who can teach English. And before, Americans could barely ever get a visa because there was always like the British who were coming down to teach English, which they learn British English anyway most of the time. So, you know, there was also that. Now that there's Brexit, it kind of makes it a little bit even playing field. But I mean, there's still, Ireland is still in there. So Irish have like can go get a job, no problem.
Yes.
So yeah, because like definitely English school sponsoring a visa is really uncommon, like very, very uncommon.
And I think as well, it's expensive. Do they have to pay? If they sponsor you, do they have to pay for that?
No, they, well, they think they do, but they don't technically have to. A lot of them will pay a lawyer or somebody to do it for them because they just don't want to. Honestly, they could do it themselves without a lawyer, because basically to sponsor you, all they have to do is give you a contract, like offer you a legit contract. Then they have to just basically take copies of copies of the owner's ID and then copies of like their income and like their taxes. They just have to show all of this proof that they're a legit company and that they need you for XYZ position. And they just have to show that to the immigration office. Like that's all they have to do. They don't have to pay, or they have to pay technically like a small fee, but I think it's like €20. Like it's not really. But yeah, so like they don't necessarily have to. Then after they get that permission, it's all up to you. You have to do the second half. I think the misconception is one, that a lot of companies think it's a lot more work than it actually is. Two is that, yeah, I think they do think that they have to pay more, but I mean, they end up having to pay you, like they have to pay all the, like your fees of moving, like all that negotiating stuff. So there is that.
Is quite simply utilize LinkedIn. If you don't already have a professional profile on LinkedIn, create one. Start connecting with Italian companies. Start creating your profile on LinkedIn to advertise your skill set and services, and think of ways that they could benefit an Italian company depending on your sector. Start to promote yourself. Start to form those connections. You can also do this through expat groups, but as I've mentioned, you have to be careful because in these expat groups are a lot of people who have had some negative experiences and unfortunately are not going to be full of optimism and joy for your adventure. So you need to use those expat groups to your advantage. By all means, form the connections where you can, but also try not to pay too much attention to those people who aren't as supportive about your idea as you had hoped. So these are some good places that you can begin to form connections. As I've mentioned in It Feels Like pretty much all of my videos, Italy is a country where connections are at the heart and soul of everything that you do. And so I can only say the more that you can try to form those connections, even if they are in a virtual capacity in the beginning, you will start to gain some traction and some momentum. And that is how you start to open yourself up to the opportunities, because positions, some vacancies are not advertised in normal means. They're not advertised on one of the employment sites that I showed you before. They are simply advertised locally through word of mouth, through somebody knowing somebody who knows somebody else. That is how a lot of work here, especially in the South, is advertised. So for this reason, the more connections you can form early on, the better it is for you. The second thing I would say is just be proactive. Send all the emails that you can send your CV, Google, love Google jobs in your language in Italy. understand what skills you have, how you can apply them to the work situation here. See what you can do to learn from other people's experiences. Go on YouTube, Google people's experiences of working in Italy, see the types of work that they do. Is it something that you could do? Learn from other people. Of course, this could go one of two ways, because you could equally have someone who has had a negative experience as well as someone who has had a positive one. But equally, even through somebody else's perceived failures, there is a lesson that you can learn. So I think that there is no harm in hearing other people's stories about their experiences, but always remembering that you have the complete power to write your own story. You are not subject to the same narrative. So that's something that is very important to consider. Something else I would say as well to bear in mind is that finding work is a job all by itself. It doesn't matter what country you're in, you've got to put the effort in if you want to gain some sort of reward out of it. So you have to be working and dedicating a good amount of time every day to approaching companies, to sending emails, to cultivating your LinkedIn profile, to connecting with people in expat groups. It's one of those things. The work will never come to you. You have to put the effort in. And yes, it feels like you are working to find work, but you know, that's how it is sometimes. It's rewarding in the end when you find it, but it's not necessarily handed to you on a plate from the very beginning. You have to put the effort in first before you see the outcome. These are just some important things that I would say if you're thinking of working in Italy, you need to consider. Please don't buy into the myth that there is no work here. I hope I have demonstrated through this video that it's a complete myth. It's very much skill dependent. It's very much dependent on what part of Italy you live in. Yes, there are always exceptions. But the fact is, there are jobs here in Italy. We are not a country without work. And all the people that want to tell you that they can't find a job, I can't speak for their personal experiences, but maybe there are other underlying factors that point towards why they are not employed that may not be anything that could impact you or limit you. Let's begin with electrical appliances. My first piece of advice for you is actually not to move with electrical appliances from your country unless they share the same power and or plug as Italy. Now, the reason I say this is twofold. Firstly, if you are in the unfortunate position where you encounter a problem with your electrical device once you're living here in Italy, it's far more complicated to get it fixed if you haven't got proof of purchase from within Italy itself. Whereas if you purchase an item from an electrical shop here in Italy and something goes wrong, you can take it back, or it's normally covered under warranty within Italy. So I really recommend that you consider this for this reason, but also because it's not good to run your electrical appliances on adapters for extended periods of time. Now, moving from the UK to Italy would have meant that I would have had to do that if I had decided to move with my television and sound system, for example, because in the UK we have a completely different plug for our electrical appliances. So I decided to just move with the absolute bare essentials, notably just my phone and my Kindle. And later on, I ended up buying Italian versions of those. But I really recommend selling your appliances back in your country, moving with the absolute bare minimum of what you need, and then reinvesting your money into appliances once you start living here in Italy. It honestly will save you a lot of headaches further down the road. Now, two places that I recommend that you look at if you are going to follow this piece of advice would be My Expert and Media World. Both of these are pretty much national electrical shop chains. You can find them pretty much across all of Italy on high streets and also online. And of course, we've got the king of online shopping, Amazon, where you can find pieces as well. In travel-sized versions of your favorite beauty products until you find an alternative here in Italy. Now, this tip is often overlooked because you can pretty much find your favorite brands wherever you are in the world. However, a couple of things that you need to know are that firstly, you may pay more for that brand here in Italy. I've noticed this myself with certain brands from the UK, like Rimmel, for example, costs a lot more money here than it did back in the UK. And also the brands may well trade under a different name in Italy. So an example of this is Radox, which is a famous bath and shower brand in the UK, trades as Adidas here in Italy. So these are the little nuances that take a little bit of time time to understand and get to know. So I really recommend, if you have a little stack of travel-sized favorites, you've got a bit of time to understand where you can buy the equivalent here in Italy, or indeed experiment with an Italian version. Sephora is a great shop where you can find many of the international beauty brands, and again, it's pretty much a national chain, so you should be able to find that wherever you move to in Italy. Also, as an Italian equivalent, Kiko is a popular Italian high street beauty brand, which you may consider trying as well if you want to make that transition. But you need time to understand the little nuances here when it comes to purchasing the beauty brands that you love using back at home. So make sure you've got a stack of supplies just to keep you going until you get yourself sorted out. So first tip is to bring sentimental items with you. Now, as much as I really endorse a minimalistic method of packing when it comes to moving to Italy, of course, I also think it's really important to have those sentimental items that remind you of moments in your life with you as you're building your new life here in Italy. It just helps you to retain that connection. One item that I moved with, which has a lot of sentimental value to me, is this laughing Buddha. This was actually my granddad's, and it's really, really old. I remember being a child, sitting in my nan and granddad's living room, seeing it on the windowsill, and just absolutely falling in love with it, like as a child. And this holds a lot of meaning to me, particularly because my granddad is no longer alive. So for this, I think it's really important to hold on to these moments and memories, and that's why I think that you should bring key things with you that have that sentimental value, because it will definitely help your home to feel more like a home at the very beginning when you're setting everything up. So the first thing that you are going to want to never, under any circumstances, ever do is move in the month of August. Let me explain. This is the huge mistake that we made 2.5 years ago when we moved from Salerno to Palermo, and it was a huge mistake for two main reasons. First and foremost, August is unbearably hot. It is by far one of the hottest months of the year, and all anybody can reasonably think about is going to the beach. It is so difficult to fathom the energy to do anything, let alone the stressful, hard-working process of moving home. It's just really, really difficult. And I struggled a lot that year when we moved home. It was just a sweaty, horrible mess. The second reason you are not going to want to move home in Italy in August is because it is really a holiday month in August. I liken it to being just a bit of a dead month because you have Ferragosto, which falls on the 15th of August every year. And this is a national Italian holiday. And so as a result, August tends to be the month when most Italians will take their holiday, however long that may be. So for some Italian people, it might be a week, 2 weeks, and for others, the entire month. And so what that means if you're moving home is that you're going to find certain shops and services closed for periods of time during the month of August. And this is undoubtedly going to delay your move. In fact, our move was really delayed by about 3 weeks because everything moved so much slower in August in Italy, and as a result we had to wait for services to resume, shops to reopen, and yeah, if we'd moved at another time of the year, for sure it would have been a much quicker process. So if you can avoid moving in the month of August, I really, really recommend it. The second thing you need to do is to get everything in writing. There is a proverb that goes something like, spoken words fly, written words remain. And it's really true. 2.5 years ago, when we moved from Salerno to Palermo, we took what we were told as gospel, and we didn't get certain things that were promised to us as part of this home in black and white. And so when it came to the day of signing the contract, we realized that those things were not detailed in the contract. And then we faced the kind of revelation that actually we were not going to get those things after all. And, you know, it was never going to go anywhere. It was only ever going to be a battle of words, because without anything being in writing, who can prove what was said and when? no one. And so that was a huge lesson for us, because we had really been led to believe something. And I'm kind of surprised at myself, because I am so precise in everything that I do. But I really trusted these people, and I trusted that what they said to us was genuine. But it later transpired it wasn't. So, this is why you must always have your wits about you when you are signing any documents here, and when you are dealing with people here when it comes to moving. If it's not in writing, it's not happening. So please remember this philosophy, okay? Don't be stunned like we were. Make sure that you have everything in writing to protect yourself. Which leads me nicely into budgeting. You need to budget, and then budget some more, because in my opinion, moving home in Italy is actually pretty expensive. Now, I think it's expensive in any part of the world that you move to, but there's something about the deposits that are required, especially if you're renting a property here in Italy, that makes everything so wildly expensive, in my opinion. If you're renting a home here in Italy, deposits can vary. Some landlords who are really super cautious might require you to leave at least a 6-month deposit, others 3 months. But on top of that, you'll always have to pay the first month's rent up front as well. So that's a lot of money that you're shelling out before you've even factored in any other costs associated with your move. And so I really do think you spend so much money when you move here in Italy. It's, it's big business, isn't it? So you've got to start saving and budgeting as soon as you can. Now, you're also going to need to think about the moving process as well, because a lot of buildings here in Italy are high-rise apartment style blocks. And as a result, if you need to move large items of furniture, sofas, beds, things like this, you're not actually able to transport them usually in the lift or the elevator in your building, because they're often quite small. It's not really feasible to carry it down 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 flights of stairs. So essentially what normally happens is you have to hire, within the cost of your moving services, this is usually covered by the moving company, mechanical ladders. This is what I call them. I'm sure there is a technical term for them, but essentially it is a piece of equipment that extends a ladder upwards with like a flat base, which they can then attach these really bulky items of furniture on, either out of your balcony itself or out of your window, and then they transport it back down to ground floor. Now, this is something you will see all over the place here in Palermo. Literally anybody who wants to move usually has to hire this kind of equipment. And, depending on how tall your building is, this could at least be an extra €200 that you have to factor in to the cost of your move. So yeah, that's something else that you have to think about. Tip number 1 is to get a PEC email address. Now, if you don't know what a PEC email address is, it is essentially a form of registered email service. So it's like back in the UK, if you needed to send an important document, you would go to the post office and pay a little bit extra to send the letter by registered or recorded post, so that you have proof of delivery. This essentially is the email equivalent of that service, and most government offices actually require you to have a PEC email. If you try to email the majority of government offices using a Gmail account, for example, it will bounce back and won't deliver. So it's really important that you get this, not just for the ability to email in the first place, but also for your proof of delivery. Because trust me, if you have any problems or complications later on, you will need to have this proof of delivery to show that you actually sent the email in the first place. Now, something that I didn't know until recently, when I was dealing with my first real bureaucratic nightmare here, is that government offices have a legal duty to respond to PEC emails within 30 days. So that is your general expectancy to receive a reply, 30 days. Now, of course, this is Italy. 30 days can mean, 60, 90, dopodomani, but it gives you an idea, because after those 30 days have passed, you can then send a follow-up PEC email to chase up what is happening or for a response. And after that second PEC email, you are in a stronger position to be able to visit the office in person to get things moving. This was my experience recently dealing with my change of residency here in Palermo. It was after a number of unanswered PEC emails had passed that I kept going to the office, and that's when they started to move. So essentially, it's good to know that piece of information. Now, in terms of PEC email providers, this video is in no way sponsored, but I personally use Aruba. I pay them around €12 per year for my PEC email account, and I've had no problems with them. So it is a good provider to use and they are reliable, but this is definitely the first thing that you need to get organized when you start dealing with bureaucracy here in Italy. Number 3, photocopy all of your documents. This is something that isn't often talked about, but is essential because government offices will not photocopy anything for you. So make sure you take both originals and photocopies before any in-person appointments that you have. And it just saves you the stress of being in that immediate panic where you're like, oh my God, I have to get this photocopied, where do I go? Do it beforehand. Even if it is not requested, do it, because I promise you it will make your visit so much smoother for having done so. Okay, tip number 5. Please remember that your experience will vary depending on what region in Italy that you live. I used to live in Salerno for 4 years and my bureaucracy was a dream in Salerno. I didn't really have any problems at all, and that was both pre and post Brexit. However, as you all know, I moved to Palermo last summer and it has taken me 6 months to have my change of residency confirmed, a process that should only take a maximum of 40 days. It is incredible because without residency in the region that you live, you are unable to access any medical or healthcare services, and essentially it can impact your overall stay in this country. So please understand that from region to region, it is like dealing with 2 different countries. Your experience will be very, very different. Now, a lot of regions will deal with a lot of bureaucracy matters online, especially to do with residency, using what is known as the ANPR system. This is a bit hit and miss. This is exactly how Palermo currently deal with residency. And in part, that is what has led to this 6-month delay. But it's good to know how your region deals with bureaucracy and to prepare yourself for this. Some regions you may be able to book appointments online. Others may require you to turn up in person at the office and wait your turn. It really does depend where in Italy you move to. Unfortunately, there isn't a uniform service across the whole country. It's just the luck of the draw as to where you decide to live as to the service you will receive. Number 6, probably my most important tip of all, be patient. Bureaucracy in Italy requires bucket loads of patience. And if you don't have patience, this will be the one thing that will undo all of your hard work. It doesn't matter how many times you shout at the people here. It doesn't matter how many PEC emails you might send. It doesn't matter how stressed you might get. It doesn't change the fact that you have to find patience. This is Italy. For those 6 months that I didn't have my residency confirmed and I was still showing as living back in Salerno was extremely stressful for me because I'm very meticulous with my documents. So let me tell you something, okay? You have to find a way to be patient. It's not easy. Trust me, I know. I've been very stressed these past 6 months, but as I learned, being stressed did nothing to change the situation. I still had to wait, and in the end, it was all resolved. So this is what you have to do. Have bucket loads of patience, even if it doesn't come naturally to you. It is the only way that you will survive the bureaucracy system here in Italy. The first decision is essentially to decide to accept life here for what it is. Now, I've spoken about this in other videos, but acceptance is the one thing that will make your life here in South Italy that little bit easier. There are so many things that don't work properly here in South Italy, are not organized properly, very chaotic and frustrating. But essentially, if you constantly live in this kind of comparison state where you're looking at how things were done in your country or the country that you've come from previously, and you're kind of comparing them and talking about them and complaining, you end up making yourself feel very, very bitter and unhappy. And this is not a good combination for wanting to remain in a country. So I think if you're really sure that South Italy especially is the place that you want to live, you have to accept South Italy for what it is. It's not a perfect part of Italy. In fact, I really don't think there is a perfect part of Italy, but it is what it is. It's real, rugged and raw, as I say in so many of my videos. So if you choose to accept life for what it really is here, I truly believe that you will have a much better and healthier experience, and it will just help you to adjust better to your new life in South Italy, more so than if you are constantly complaining or moaning or just comparing your life to the one that you're used to. The second decision is that you need to decide that your story is your own. Now, I get it. When you decide that you want to move to Italy, the first thing you normally do is look online, read about other people's experiences, go into some expat groups, ask some questions. But you've got to be really careful with this. And I even say this as a bit of a disclaimer on my own channel. My videos are my experiences, but they are not necessarily going to be yours for both good and bad reasons. And so you have to take everything that you read about, hear about, and listen to with a pinch of salt. Because essentially, one person can have a really, really, really terrible experience, but another person can be just fine. And I've had this a lot. Like, so many people told me what a nightmare the bureaucracy would be here in Italy. Now, apart from moving to Palermo, which was probably my first real bureaucratic hurdle, trying to get my residency registered, prior to that, I had no problems, and I was living here for 4 years. I've always been able to sort out my bureaucracy with no problems. And so my journey and my experience was very different to what a lot of other people have had. And so this is what I'm trying to say. Don't get caught up in the stories of other people and their experiences. Your journey and your path is your own. And it's the same for when you're living here. Like, the way that you choose to live your life here is your decision. You are not on the same path as everybody else. We need to lose this whole comparison mindset. It's so easy to do with social media and the internet, to look at what other people are doing, what they're achieving, how they're living their life, and kind of make it mean that we're inferior in some way because our life looks different to theirs. But it's just simply not true. We all have our own purpose in life, our own reasons, rationale, motives, path that we are on. And so we need to just embrace that. And we need to remember that no two people's experiences are ever going to be the same. And so that is a decision you need to commit to. Remember, your story is not the same as everybody else's. Something else that's really important to remember is that if it's possible for others in the world, it's also possible for you, right? How often do we forget this? Like, you've got my videos on this channel, you've got plenty of other content creators on YouTube who document their life here in Italy. If they were able to move to Italy, why can it not be possible for you? Now, of course, everybody is different. There may be bureaucratic reasons that make it a little bit more difficult, or logistical reasons, whatever it may be. But essentially, if you want to make it happen, where there is a will, there is a way. I've said this in many other videos. Essentially, you can model other people, and this is another principle that Anthony Robbins talks about in his book, is this principle of modeling. Like, success leaves clues, we all know this, and essentially people who have achieved the things that you want in your life, generally speaking, follow a similar pattern. And it is about studying those people, watching videos of people who have moved to Italy. What is it about them that has made that possible? Is it their mindset? Is it their outlook on life? Is it the thing that they've decided to do in Italy for themselves? What is it that made it possible for them to be able to move to Italy, which you could perhaps replicate for yourself? What steps did they take? What things did they focus on in order to have made that a reality for themselves? And this is something that I think is super important. Like, you can learn from other people. We can all learn from each other. But essentially, when you want to make a big move to Italy, you've got to be looking around at those people who have already done it and learn something from them. Learn something from their experiences, from the advice that they want to share with you, and generally speaking, from their journey, how they got there in the first place. Learn something from them, because everybody, as I said before, can teach us something. And sometimes it is far easier if you have so-called so-called role models or people that you can look up to who have achieved what you desire, that you can replicate, that it is trying to do it on your own from scratch because it's difficult. Look for those who have already done the hard work and see what you can learn from their experience, because I promise you, with anybody who has moved to Italy, there is something that that person has done that could benefit you, or there is some kind of learning or piece of advice that they want to share that could help you in your situation. So model the behaviours of people who have moved to Italy, because if it's possible for them, that is absolutely possible for you too.